So basically, if you do something, he's probably hiring for it. All right, so it seems that that's the last job. So with that, we'll move on to the purpose of tonight, and I want to welcome Chris Johnson, who's the COO of Blue Planet Energy. Please give him a round.
Awesome, well, good evening and aloha, everyone. Great that Ryan gave us a little earthquake reminder. Want to give a shout out to our team that's in Puerto Rico. They have, okay.
Yeah, you can go beside the desk.
As some of you may know, the island's been hit by a number of earthquakes this week, and the entire electrical infrastructure is offline again. And as we'll see, some of the microgrids we just got, communications are down as well, so it's hard to get any information, but we just heard that one of the schools that has a microgrid with our systems in it is sheltering 600 people. And there's 110 of those schools that have our system. So, well, thank you, Robbie. For those of you who are first time here, Robbie is awesome at enabling access to resources, so definitely sign up for the newsletter and come back for more events. And thanks to Robbie, I know about this place. I need to use the tool in the library. So Blue Planet Energy is actually a Hawaii-based company, and we have been around for about 4 years now, and are on a mission set out by our founder to end the use of carbon-based fuel. And along the way, we've learned a lot of things and been now heavily into this microgrid work, so I'm happy to share some of the lessons about what that means and how we've evolved and what we've been doing. So we're very much we're a product company that gets out there and gets stuff done. So we're on the ground, we're putting systems in place, and so this is a little bit of from the trenches, real world lessons, and I want to share with you as we go. So clearly, we see the need to, a lot of people talk about this decentralized, right, decarbonized, digitized of where electricity systems need to go. We're a little bit I put my badge upside down here because we're a little bit kind of like the anti-utility. We help people go off-grid and make the utility irrelevant. And we do that with a scalable energy platform. Our technology is called Blue Ion, and it's really meant to be safe, resilient, and reliable, and enable clean energy. And so that's through energy storage and microgrids. In case you want to work with us, like the types of partners we're looking for, always we need to scale up how we get these systems out to the world. There's lots of bottlenecks. Somebody asked me about what are the problems, how do we do more of this? We're probably going at 10% of what we could be doing today. And I think that's not just us, but as an industry. There's a lot more that could be happening. And then we're also, as we're a growing company, always raising money as well. So if any of those things are things you want to play with, come talk to me. So just to give you a little intro to who we are, anybody here play the game Tetris? A few people lost many hours in that process. So the guy who started our company, Hank Rogers, is the entrepreneur behind the video game Tetris. He wasn't really looking to go start another company. He has been in the software space for a number of years and had a really nice exit, and then found himself in the back of an ambulance on the way to the hospital 2 weeks later with a massive heart attack. And that was kind of his aha moment, his wake up, his realization is I'm not done yet. I have more to do on this planet. Let me figure out what that is. And that led him to a life purpose that awakened his life missions. And so the first of those missions is in the use of carbon-based fuel. And we're based in Hawaii because Hank is based in Hawaii. For those who are in or familiar with the solar industry, has the highest rooftop solar penetration in the country. About 22-24% of households have rooftop solar, and it's kind of a no-brainer there. They have the most expensive electricity in the country, and so pretty much even 10 years ago, it was cheaper to go solar. And now with the declining prices, it's gotten more and more affordable to do so. However, the penetration got so extreme that in certain circuits of the grid, there was more solar being generated than there was load. And the utility freaked out. And they basically stopped letting people interconnect. So about the end of 2014, they just sort of killed the solar industry altogether. It was growing just leaps and bounds, everybody was getting it, and then all of a sudden you couldn't interconnect anymore. And they've now required what's called like a self-supply. So you basically can't put there's not, the net energy metering that we benefit from here, where essentially you're using the grid like a battery. You put all your excess power on the grid and you just pull it back when you need it. They said, no, don't do that. We already have too much. And that was right about the time Hank was trying to, I'm going to do all these things. He started a nonprofit called the Blue Planet Foundation, and just to make it confusing, everything in Hank's world is called Blue Planet something, so we kind of need that extra, namespace to distinguish, so we're Blue Planet Energy. The foundation was the group that had Hawaii become the first state to be committed to 100% clean energy. I think I forgot to tell this thing not to go to sleep, so I'm trying to keep it awake. And he was trying to put solar in his own house, and they wouldn't let him interconnect. And so he says, okay, I gotta figure out batteries. He literally cut the cord to his house in Honolulu and went off grid after a number of, a time of researching what's the best battery solution. And again, Hank wasn't looking to start a company, he just kind of do things Hank ways, like, I'm gonna get the best. And so we did all this research, trying all these technologies, and it essentially created our first generation of what was a product. And people wanted it. And so, hence, there was the pull from the market, and now there's Blue Planet Energy. Hank is, let's see, anything else on here that's pretty good? He's awesome. So then they brought me in, because Hank is not really our operations guy. He has his hands in a lot of pies. And so I come from a sustainability, physics background, been running a social enterprise for about 14 years. I was a B Corporation on the East Coast, and I got brought in as a consultant initially to Blue Planet Energy, working on their product software, and then it kind of just kept snowballing. They kept giving me more and more responsibilities, and until the folks who hired me said, will you be my boss? And I was like, okay. And I was in that stage of wanting to make this transition. I've been doing consulting, great clients, nonprofits, green businesses, organics, fair trade, social enterprise, all kinds of great stuff. But that sense of having to walk away from a project and not having that continuity was kind of eating at me. And I had a young one who I really feel like, it's my duty to do everything I can to ensure that the planet that he inherits it represents the fact that I tried my damnedest to make sure we don't get crushed by this climate crisis. So it was a great timing. And so I came on, I took over at Blue Planet Energy. It's been a little over 2 years, and we have been having quite a ride. So our staff is really, we see it as very important. Energy storage is still, while sometimes it feels like it's been happening forever, it's still very early as an industry, and so we really feel it's important to help the industry as a whole to mature and to adopt best practices, especially on safety. And so we're very involved across a number of organizations, just in terms of the industry leadership side. And then we have a number of partners. We'll be looking at some of their projects for tonight. So the nonprofits and foundations have actually been pushing a lot of these microgrids for critical infrastructure. So American Red Cross, Water Mission Direct Relief, Rocky Mountain Institute, and it's got a little cutoff here, but that's the Clinton Global Foundation and Elemental Accelerator, some of our partners we've been working with to get some of these projects done. So a little bit of background. It seems like off here. Okay, we might just have to pretend we know what's going on there. So in terms of climate change, there's a big push to replace fossil fuel generation. Right? All these state policies coming out, very local policies, and that's driving renewables, but those renewables need some stabilization. So that's driving this need for energy storage. So we know there's a huge context there. And the other thing is the grid is just breaking. For those of you who haven't checked out, there's a book called The Grid, The Fraying Wires of America's Energy Future, I think is the subtitle there. Definitely check it out. Amazing story of how we ended up from the whole history of the grid, from 1880 till today. And we have one of the worst quality grids in all of the developed industrialized countries. Most other countries, the quality of their grid is getting better, ours is getting worse. And now here in California, we see this impact of power shutoffs, right? Where all of a sudden, millions of people are losing power for days at a time. And then the climate events are driving the need for resilience. Right? It's not just can I save some money with solar, but when the grid's getting shut off, or when storms are happening, cutting off power to houses, people are realizing that solar panels don't work when the grid's down. big wake-up call for a lot of people. It totally doesn't make sense, right? The sun's shining, I have solar panels, why don't I have power? Well, there's a number of reasons why that is, but we need to actually be able to island systems. And I'm not going to get into definitions of like what a microgrid is. I leave that to the academics, but that's kind of my criteria. If you can island a system, if you can basically flip a big switch and cut off one side from the grid, then you have a microgrid. That's kind of my very, very simple definition. So one other thing I'll just kind of throw in here, because I think it all too often gets ignored, is safety. Energy storage is still fairly new, and then people sort of get excited like, oh, the solar cost curve, look how it's come down over these years. That's going to happen with batteries. Well, it is happening, but the solar cost curve is 4 decades in the making, and the lithium-ion battery cost curve is only 1 decade in the making. So let's not rush too fast to thinking the cheapest is the only thing to look at. So there was a fire in Arizona last year that got a lot of attention in the US, but there has been over 20 fires in 12 months in South Korea. South Korea is way ahead of us in terms of installation of energy storage capacity. They installed a gigawatt hour last year, which at the time was more than all had been installed cumulatively in the US. And so what happens is basically you've got these bad actors, this nickel and cobalt in the chemistry, and those are susceptible to thermal runaway, right? So as you operate a battery, you charge and discharge it, it heats up a little bit. At some point it can't stop getting hot, and it catches on fire. So if you remember the Samsung Notes that you can't take on the airplanes, or the hoverboards, that's what's going on there. All right, these are unfortunately getting more and more off the page. So I borrowed a couple slides here from SEPA, which is a wonderful organization. If for those in the industry, they have a number of working groups, and I would highly recommend that you consider joining. So there's one working group on microgrids. And so just to give you a sense of like the complexity, and we're not going to go too much into the regular side of it, but why is it hard to get some of these things done is there's all these variants and questions about how they get done, right? So who owns them, and who operates them, who gets the benefit from those, and then how do you deal with the cost recovery? And so there's a lot of different business models out there about how that happens. And then there's sort of the barriers to adoption, which can come down to interconnection, which the folks who own this building have a lot to say about how easy it is to interconnect or not. All right, we'll just skip over these things, but and again, sort of just to give you a sense of the complexity of the microgrids, this is a great slide from Jared Leader of SEPA, who just kind of talks about the regulatory issues that can touch on microgrids. So any of these areas can make it complex. And so we've tried to kind of simplify this and say, like, we're not going into that world. We're not even going to be worrying about the utility interest with our microgrids. We're going to go after the customer and make sure that it has value and benefit to them. So what we do, we are a product company. Our product line, the Blue Ion, we released this Blue Ion 2.0 about 2.5 years ago. We thought it was going to be a mostly residential product. Instead, we've had a huge adoption in the commercial space that actually drove us to launch a commercial product called LX, which we just launched back in the fall. So we're getting our first deployments out of those. And essentially, energy storage is just too hard. It's too complex, and our job is to make it easy. Easy to design, easy to buy, easy to install, and easy to service. And then we distinguish our products because of that safety profile, the scalability, the quality of the product, and which leads us to have an awesome warranty, and then the technical support that goes along with that. Because we don't install these, right? We have a whole network of installers, and they need support to be able to get these in the ground. So just on the chemistry side, the one thing I'll point out here, I have a pointer here? Yeah. This LiFePO or LFP, lithium iron phosphate, lithium ferrous phosphate is the different chemistry, right? So it's not the chemistry that you'll usually see in electric vehicles. It's a chemistry that doesn't catch on fire. And then with our new product, so this is the Verge conference from a couple months ago in Oakland. Just as the power shutoffs were happening, we powered the whole conference, a 3,000 person conference microgrid with our new LX solution. And so, one of the key things with microgrids is it's not, usually you think about having multiple sources of generation. So that could be the grid, that could be a generator, it could be solar, that could be wind, it could be basically any source. But usually you want multiple sources to have that redundancy and resilience. And so that takes a more sophisticated software and control systems. That's kind of this is like just more presentation mode of the control software here. But microgrids end up being more expensive because they have to have all these extra hardware and software control layers to be able to make it integrated, as opposed to just having sort of a solar and storage for cost savings on a system. So our customers are residential and commercial. We use a certified installer network.
Excuse me, Chris?
Yeah.
What were the size of those two batteries that powered the whole conference?
Yeah, so this is this is 64 kilowatt hours of storage and 125 kilowatt inverter. So this is not actually the full system, it's sort of like a mini version of it, just to make it portable. We built this microgrid, and so part of it too, people are like, it takes so much to build microgrids. This microgrid was built in less than 48 hours in the street in Oakland. And it has 4 EV chargers on it, various random solar things, electric scooter charging, like all kinds of random stuff integrated onto it, and built in under 48 hours. And worked flawlessly. The governor opened the conference, and people were like, I've never heard microgrid said so many times in one conference after PG&E started shutting off the power. This slide, you see a little bit of the scalability. So this is a 16 kilowatt hour system, but you can kind of stack as many of them together. And again, Hank being the Tetris guy, things like to fit together. And so these are actually both, this is a commercial install, this is a national park in Utah. This is actually a residential install, it's quite large. But yeah, from our base in Hawaii, we have installs in over 25 states, a large install base in Puerto Rico, Mexico, Canada, and across a wide variety of use cases. So batteries are very flexible. Solar is easy, sun shines, you make electricity. Batteries, you can use them however you want, and the customer decides how to use them. Some people just want it for backup. Some people want it for various other cases. So we'll get into some of those use cases here. So our focus has been on critical infrastructure. Batteries are still expensive, and so we know we can't deliver the social benefit we want to every person, so we're trying to generate a larger footprint of benefit by working on critical infrastructure, because we know if we take the community infrastructure and make it resilient, we will be able to integrate and impact the whole community. So to give you a sense of those, these are from some of our projects in Puerto Rico. So we have remote microgrids for water pumping. So just like there's an electrical grid, there's a water grid, and these are communities that are off the water grid. And after Hurricane Maria, most people, I think the average loss of power was 6 months. Loss of water, about 45 days. And so with communities that didn't have electricity and they weren't on the water grid, they also didn't have water. And so a lot of these communities vacated. People left the communities. There was a lot of waterborne illnesses that happened then. And so we've done 100 of these water pumping projects with Direct Relief and Water Mission as our partners there. Business continuity, I think that's one of the places where we see some of the easiest economic justification. So the largest bank on the island, Banco Popular, they were losing millions of dollars, right? Essentially the island converted to a cash economy overnight. But people couldn't get out cash because the ATMs didn't have power. So this is just purely battery backup. And these are some of the Red Cross projects. So this is schools around the island. And so through this, the local ecosystem wasn't ready to do energy storage and microgrids. So we trained over 1,000 people on the island, and we know that at least 100 people were hired at our local installers over the course of 6 months. And this is now a new industry, new green jobs, and a new ecosystem that can support and continue to install there. So this is just a sense of some of those, and we like to spread the aloha and with the vibe with where we go. So these are local Puerto Ricans who got to hang out with our folks and really jamming on the shaka there. So this is, so just to give you a sense, about 7 kilowatts of solar, one 16 kilowatt hour unit, and the combination of the solar and the battery allow there to be an optimal water pumping schedule for these water pumps. So that's, over the first 6 projects, there was about 1,200 people that were benefited with clean water. Another one of those, so with the Water Mission, we did about, I think, a dozen projects with Direct Relief. We've got 100 community microgrids that have gone in, very similar design. Banco Popular, again, this is just purely battery backups. This is actually a 3-phase commercial system. So very, small, it's scalable, range in size from 64 to 160 kilowatt hours. Again, these units are very stackable, so they can be tuned to whatever's optimal for that need. And the way these get designed is you figure out what are the loads that you need to power and how long do you need to power it for, and then just plug in, punch in some numbers and figure out how much you need there. The Red Cross schools, these were, so these are serving as resiliency hubs around the island. So these are primarily schools. They are emergency shelters in the community, and Red Cross is a shelter organization, essentially emergency shelter. And what happened was after Hurricane Maria, these shelters got stocked with blankets and food and water, and they had no power. And so it became its own problem. And so the Red Cross has now turned into this organization funding this resilience work. So most of these installs are about 50 kilowatts of solar, 100, 120 kilowatt hours of the batteries, and they'll actually break them into 2 microgrids on site. So one handles the kitchen area to ensure there's a functioning kitchen, and the other handles a shelter area, so it's bathrooms and some classrooms which can be used for shelter. And these are where, again, we don't have a clear story of what's going on, but these are, they were in use after Hurricane Dorian, just this last year, and they're in use right now, post the earthquakes. We've also now started working with some organizations on the medical front. There's various organizations that do medical relief, and they realize we can't do medical relief if we don't have power. So this is on the island of Vieques, which is off of Puerto Rico, and is a cancer treatment center. Vieques has one of the highest cancer incidents in the country. It was used as a naval bombing base for a number of years. And people would just, you basically, the island gets its power from a big cable that comes from the main island of Puerto Rico, and it was broken in the Hurricane Maria, and so it's still broken, right? So they're running off of now a couple big diesel generators, but they also fault very regularly, and so people were basically just giving up. They would just stop getting treatment because you would basically have to take a ferry for an hour to the main island, and people were just like, whatever, I'll just stay here and die of cancer, and that was like literally the conversation happening. So this group actually has come and they've activated this. It's not just energy resilience, they actually have food and water resilience as well, communications redundancy. So this is really a resiliency hub for the island. All right, and I think that's the walkthrough of some of those microgrids. So again, these are harder than they need to be. And part of it is I think we need more adventurous sources of financing, and we need more political will. And really the only way we're going to get the political will is by all of us raising our voices, engaging with our local communities, and helping to get these things done. Because we're trying to get these done across a myriad of jurisdictions, right? I mean, just talking earlier about Alameda. Right? Alameda's got its own little world, and that's different than some of the CCAs, and that's different than the different utility industries and IOUs, and so it's all of that diversity makes it more complex to scale up. So it really does take a local approach, and I really hope that it comes with a planned approach. Right? Let's not just be responding to emergencies. Let's plan out how we want to have our future and how we want to have this resilience and how we want to have an awesome community and build it together. So thank you all. Do you want to do some questions now?
Go for it, yeah.
Okay, sure.
Hey, thanks. Great presentation. 2 things. One, you said we also need financing innovation or risks. Do you mean more like money moving into funding innovation, like your company, or do you mean more financing so that like end customers, corporations can afford like purchasing this equipment and getting set up?
All of it.
All of it.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely more money needs to go into the space. So on the in terms of like what we might think of like project financing, where which is now fairly common in the commercial space. Definitely on the solar side, you can get financing. You add batteries, it gets more complex. Investors are a little uncertain. There's a lot of due diligence. One of our advisors is working with all these large sources of capital. Where I mean, there's so much money sitting around in some cases that they don't care about the return. And they got scared off by that Arizona fire. 5 deals just totally froze that were about to go forward. And it's like there's a level of technical sophistication needed to understand how to navigate this space and even how to buy a good battery, right? Or a good make a choice on a microgrid. There's a lot of detail that goes in there.
How do people do that? Because I imagine there are other solutions out there. You have one version of it. What is the customer mindset to figure that out? What are they trying to solve?
Yeah, so a lot of times they're dependent on their local installers, right? So business would call the local installer and be like, I want to lower my power bill, or I want to be more resilient, I want to not have outages, and then you kind of optimize around that. The way I tell people is so we're a premium solution. We are striving to offer the best that's out there. We're not the cheapest at all, and we don't want to be the cheapest. And so, but what I tell people is if you do your research, you'll find out that we're the best. But most people don't do the research. They'll look at a couple data points, right? So there's a number of things to look at, and I don't want to bore everybody with the technical terminology of spec sheets and stuff, but there really are big differences, and there's not a lot of, I think there's a lot of new entrants in the field who are taking advantage of ignorance in the market to sell a solution that's subpar. We see it all the time. We see a lot of entrants coming into Puerto Rico doing that, and so that's why we seek to say let's do the certifications, let's set the best practices, let's do the best we can, and let's share those knowledge, because if we don't, even just recently, the fires that happened on the Walmart routes, and I think Target as well, there was issues just with safety and quality of installations. If we don't raise the bar ourselves, the industry could just get totally slammed, and then everybody could be hurt, instead of it being more about what actually was going wrong. Yeah, Robbie.
I know that stationary batteries, you don't really have the same weight constraints as lithium-ion for automotive. But what's sort of the energy density potential of this version, this chemistry, or other chemistries that you're looking at compared to lithium-ion?
Sure. Yeah. So there are.
And also, can you repeat the questions in case people can't?
Oh yeah, definitely. So questions about energy density and how the chemistry we use varies, and then how other chemistries vary as well. So. There is a driver in the electric vehicle space for that compact size and that big burst of energy, right? Hank drives a Tesla, and he says, I love ludicrous mode in my car. I don't need ludicrous mode in my house, right? And so, there really isn't that need for that big punchy power that chemistry can deliver. It is a lot of fun in a vehicle. Some may argue whether or not that's necessary, right? So our batteries are a little bigger. They actually get used in electric buses. We'll use LFP chemistry because there's less of a space constraint. And then there's bigger chemistries as well. So flow batteries is another one that's a non-lithium chemistry. They tend to be very large. So it's a little bit, I don't have a great example of how to do apples to apples, but flow batteries tend to be sort of a thing as large as both of these desks, and this big. It's a giant vat of liquid that's used. It's a very different process. It's pretty cool, but it's a whole different thing. And we even get we get complaints sometimes of space constraints, but flow batteries are a whole new dimension. Yes.
There's another alternative on batteries coming, which is ceramic semiconductors. That thing that was 16 kilowatt hours can be 16 liters. 3 kilowatt hours per kilogram coming, and 48% efficiency solar panels coming that are related to both ceramic semiconductor physics.
Nice, awesome. Yeah, there's real cool stuff coming. I've seen also a zinc solution battery where it's the energy is captured by either precipitating or dissolving zinc metal. Super low cost per kilowatt hour. And those batteries are, so one of the challenges is what we call long duration, right? So our batteries can deliver a lot of power. They're usually, if you ran them at full power, they'd probably last 2 hours. Right? Most people don't run their battery at full power for some given set of time, but that's just sort of a metric used in the industry. But the grid, in terms of dealing with this duck curve and the larger issues, is going to need more of this long storage. That may not really be as relevant to the microgrid conversation, but we think there's going to be a hybridizing of different battery technologies. Yeah.
So one methodology to help with the financing and deployment of microgrids, primarily because of the cost of storage, is to do this programmatically through aggregating these capacities together. And a lot of CCAs right now are out there in the market with RFPs looking for these kind of proposals. I'm curious what has been your experience in doing aggregation and providing the collection of your installed assets into the virtual power plant or a collection of capacity related to wholesale markets.
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, a lot of our customers aren't on the grid, so aggregation isn't really relevant for them. But there are the potential for, and then we get into this sort of variability in different geographies and markets, right? So there's only certain markets where you can bid energy storage into a wholesale market, and so it adds to the complexity. You know, as we're installing these, I mean, our warranty on our battery is 15 years. The system's expected to last at least 20 years. We know there will be new revenue streams possible with those. We try and make it work today with whatever the customer's needs are and the finances are today, but we know something else is going to come out. There'll be markets in 5 years that there aren't today. So we have not focused too much on aggregation right now. I think as we see more of these grid-tied microgrids, like when we're working on these critical infrastructure microgrids, I think that will lead us down that path more. But it's a lot of people talk about. I think it's the term's gone out of fashion now, but value stacking, right? So you can, you get your kilowatt hours, you get your energy, reduce that bill, you get your kilowatts, you reduce your demand charge, and then now you start doing things like bidding into wholesale, doing time of use shifting even within the batteries in California. Since we have a time of use market, you can store the energy from the day and use it in the evening, and so that can lower your rates substantially that you're paying there. So there's different ways to kind of do the stacking, both for the customer's benefit as well as the grid's benefit. But in most cases, the grid is just like we're moving too slow, right? The markets, the utilities, and the regulators need to enable these markets, and they're primarily not there. But I refer to some of our friends who are much more working on the policy side who can answer those questions too.
Hi.
Hi.
So in a traditional system, like a PV-only system, the inverters are different from a completely off-grid, I guess if you call that a microgrid, that's completely off-grid. And you mentioned doing a grid-tied microgrid, so basically like a microgrid that forms only when the utility goes down. Are you finding that there's still a big need for innovations in terms of inverter manufacturers that can fulfill that need?
Yeah, inverters are a headache.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh yeah, sure, thanks. So question is in terms of solar only and the inverter technology that's new there. Again, the inverter is like what turns the DC power from your solar or your battery into AC that you can use in your house or business. If you just have a solar install, you have these inverters that are just doing that. They can't island. When you do a battery-based install, you can have that same kind of inverter coupled with a battery inverter. We call AC coupling. So this is how you would say retrofit a place that already has solar. You can AC couple a battery onto it and make the microgrid. Or you could have a DC coupled where the solar and the storage are going to the same system. There are players that keep dropping out of the space. I think in the solar side, the margins were so small on inverters that it's kind of like big players keep getting out. We've seen a couple of new entrants into the battery-based inverter space, especially residential side. Some interesting players there. Commercial side is more frustrating, but there's players. But yeah, I'd love to pick your brain on inverters.
Are there inverters that do both, or do you still need two?
No, if you're installing a new system, you can do the solar and the battery on the same inverter. It's somewhat, there's efficiency gains if you do DC coupling, right? Because instead of turning the DC into AC and then turning it back into DC from the solar to the battery, you can just charge the battery directly from the solar. So it sort of depends, and there's a lot of, this gets into a very big philosophical area of installation and design, which is like more than we have time for, getting into, and I don't have that far of opinions. I feel like there's advantages in both.
2 more questions.
Cool. All right, we'll try one over here and go over here.
Thanks for taking my question and for your presentation. For these, for the emergency response from communities, have you done LCOE analysis and stacked it up against diesel through an LCOE lens. I'm curious about that and how perhaps that is dovetailed with deal structuring. You know, look at the PPA form of financing and just how enabling it was, has been for solar. What do you see
Sure.
in the evolution of that?
Yeah, so LCOE, or levelized cost of energy, is an analysis you can do on like basically over the lifetime of the system. If you charge and discharge this and use it every day, like taking that upfront cost and sort of turning it into like, what if I just paid for it like I was paying for kilowatt hours? Yeah, so diesel, especially in a lot of the island and remote communities we work in, I mean, people are paying $1 a kilowatt hour, right? If you consider the cost of getting diesel to a place, right, and then having that equipment and operating it, so we can definitely beat that. And so, yeah, and it's in other markets, it varies a lot by markets, but yeah, we see even if you pair a battery with a generator, right? Because you know, we ran into this in Puerto Rico. We'd go to a police station and they would fire on a generator. They could only afford 2 hours a day of fuel, and so they would charge the laptops and the cell phones. But then, because it's generators, kind of inefficiently making all this extra energy, they would let people come out. They would bring their nebulizers, right, some of their medical equipment, and use those too. But it was the only power in the city. And so we're like, okay, well, what if you just run it full bore, which is going to be its most efficient, charge the battery, shut the generator off, and then now you run off your battery. So you can actually extend generator runtime in terms of like how much fuel you have, as well as improve the operation of it, and leverage the battery. So there's ways that even just pairing a battery with a generator or replacing it. A lot of our off-grid customers, they still have a generator just in case, right? Because if you really want to be resilient, like if you've got 5 days of rain, like we sometimes have here, you might not be charging up those batteries fully. Sometimes you might need a little boost. Yeah, last one.
You've talked about a multitude of technologies, the different components that you build these systems from, but the majority of your implementations are islanded. Is that correct?
All of our systems have the capability of being islanded.
Or are not interconnected?
Many of them are interconnected, actually.
Many of them are?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
but my point is though, to what extent have you formalized or made uniform each of these build-outs? Because you've got a common chemistry, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
But all of it is, we just talked about the inverters and the control systems and monitoring. How many of those components have you standardized on, or are you constantly evaluating per job and per need at given customers?
Right. So
building out custom solutions?
Yeah, so our job as a product company is we're providing that system that is already integrated. So we're like, it still has to be like, you know, in some of the Red Cross jobs, I mean, like the way it got laid out or the stuff was implemented was very site specific, but that was a nice project because they approached it from like, let's do 100 plus of this same thing. And so they standardized around panels, our product on the microgrid side. And so there is some efficiency there. We definitely like those projects where it's like, let's do a lot of the same things. We're looking at like, you know, or real estate managers who might have buildings that have the same profile that we can have a similar solution to. Because there's some efficiencies there for sure. Because of one more, that seemed like a really enthusiastic question.
Well, I'm just curious, it's actually kind of related to his question. It's what kind of innovation or what have you witnessed in terms of installation of these microgrids as far as like efficiency gains in the installation, cost savings in the installation process, and like what do you foresee or like what are you looking forward to, or what do you see as like future cost savings in terms of installation? Because I know that is a big part of the cost.
Yeah, I think actually right now the CPUC's work here, you know, they've literally started a workshop series which is like, what can we do to get as many microgrids in place before next fire season? And you know, with the permitting and the construction process, it is a long process. I mean, for our commercial systems, we look at like a 6-month timeline. You know, our work really takes like 2 days, right? So, but it might take 6 months to get the whole thing done, sometimes longer. So I think and in Puerto Rico, like they passed 100% renewable energy policy there this last year, and with it, it forced interconnection timelines. So it would, you know, so essentially forcing the hand of the utility to ensure that interconnection is dealt with in a timely way. You know, and for the folks who are, you know, dealing with installations, and John will tell you about his horrific experience getting this done here in San Francisco, but like that, like lack of incentive for the utility to allow a project to go forward is really hurting progress. I mean, we need the political will to open the doors. We can get this stuff done all day long. Like one of the things that I guess in part of our message at Verge, the technology's here. We're not waiting on some miracle, some great innovation. Like anything that new comes, sure, we can deploy it, but like we are ready. We need the path to be cleared.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all so much.